Okay, so once we imported Axios, we can come down to the component did mount, and the first thing we need to do is call Axios, just like this. And then we comment this out, or just take it all away. And then underneath that, we are going to make our GET request. And what the GET request is going to do is it's going to grab all that information on that API that we just checked on. So we say .get, and we just put in the URL. So now we're just fetching all that data from the API. So we're fetching all those items. So what Axios does is it returns a promise, and a promise is sort of like a callback in JavaScript, but what it does is it just stores the information about whether the events have happened or not. So what the promise can do is we can say .then, so after it gets all that info, it's going to take in a response as an argument. Do our arrow function, and let's console log the response. So we get the info from the API, then we do something, we're going to take in a response, and we're going to console log that response. And let me open this in a new window, and let's see what that response is. So that response is an object. So that's all that promise is it's an object. And when you console log it, it just returns that object. And if you look inside data, here's where all the data is. And let's look inside network, refresh the page. We should have right here, the items. So all the items is all that data that was just inside of that console log. Okay, any questions on what we just did?
Could you just run through it one more time? So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. So we first need to download the dependency for Axios. And it was already downloaded for us, but in your projects, you'll just have to do like yarn add Axios. You then import it at the top, and inside of the component did mount. So when that component gets mounted to the DOM, we want to call Axios here. We want to say .get, and we are getting the items from the API. So this could be any API that you want, or any of the APIs you make in the backend. For this one, it's just the items. So we're getting all the items. Then is the promise. So then is what happens after the get. It takes in a response as an argument, and then we're just console logging the response. And then we can look again, and that response is an object. Inside of that object, we have all the data. See someone typing. Yes, Michael. This will replace any of that hard-coded data from now on forward. I don't think we'll be using any more hard-coded data. Yeah, so this is really cool because now instead of having all that hard-coded data and importing it in your components, now all you have to do is you just got to fetch that API, and you do it through Axios. Good question. Okay, so we know on component did mount, we need to set the state. We need to set the state on the items. So let's take away the console log. We already saw that. And let's replace it with this dot set state. So I can type it. This dot set state. And inside of that, we want to say items, and assign it the response dot data. So remember, that response was an object. Inside of that object, we had the data. So we're saying the items is that response and the data inside of it. So after the dot then, there's a really cool thing called dot catch. And what dot catch does is it's going to catch any errors. So inside of it, it'll take error as an argument. We'll write our arrow function, and we can console.log the error. So on the component did mount, if it can't get the items or it can't fire the then, it will go to the catch and it's going to catch that error and it's going to console log the error. Let's refresh it. Console, you see there's no error because of course we could fetch all the items. everything's running perfectly. Now let's see if we can throw an error. Let's try 2M's on items. And let's see what that does. All right, so you see in the console, so get not found went straight to the catch. It caught the error and saying request failed with the status code 404. 404 means web page not found. Makes sense because we don't have items with 2M's. So using Axios with React. So Axios is a promise-based, it's promise-based, and thus we can take advantage of async and await for more readable asynchronous code. We don't need to learn about this right now. So we can also intercept and cancel requests, and there's built-in client-side protection against cross-site request forgery. All we really need to know today is just when using Axios about the GET requests. So there's something called CRUD operations for building like RESTful APIs, and that's create, read, update, and delete. There's only 4 CRUD operations, and you'll always be either creating, you'll be reading or getting, you'll be updating, or you'll be deleting. Right now, we just want to get, we want to read. So they are creating a new component named person list. And inside of the component did mount, they have Axios, and they're getting this URL, and they're getting the users. So using Axios.get, they get a promise, which returns a response object. So if you remember, that response object had all that data inside of it, just like we did right here. Dot then, got the response object. And they're assigning the response data, so all that data inside the object, to persons. And they're setting the state to persons. What we did was we're setting the state, and we're saying items is the response.data. And up here, items is just an empty array for now in state, and we're going to set that items to the data inside the response object. If there's an error, so if it can't get this URL, if it can't get the data inside of it, we're going to catch the error, and all we're going to do is console log, and we're going to say error. And you can console log anything. You can say, oh, there's an error. Just put that in a string. We don't need a string just because we're saying error right here. And then it'll tell you the error. So let's open it up for any questions that we have.